Welcome to the Gab with Sheila
and Lisa,
where you will find some fascinating guests, stimulating conversation.
Funny stories are a guarantee, and a new take on creating balance in your life.
So put down your work, push aside the stress. It's time to have fun.
This is the Gab.
It is said that art and science are closely related. Today's guest shows us how true that statement really is. As someone who leads by example, prioritizing health, wellness, and balance in life, he shares with us his strong passion for both medicine and music as a hematologist and thrombosis specialist for the Niagara Region Health System and as a lead singer-songwriter for his band. Please welcome Dr. Blair Leonard. Okay. Well, here's a question. If you drop an F-bomb, does that make it PG-13 or does that make it rated M for mature? I really don't know what the guidelines are.
Yeah, I don't know either.
I would assume it's mature.
Okay.
It's interesting because obviously society's changed a lot, right? I mean, as far as what people have access to on the internet, compare that 20 years ago with today, very, very different. So I can imagine the ratings somewhat reflect what people are kind of willing to accept from a social perspective. So, but yeah, I don't know if it's what the line is, so to speak.
And you're right on that, because the F word in particular, when I was growing up, that was taboo. That was saved for, a really bad moment or moment in anger. And, today it's almost commonplace in everyday language for some people.
Like you.
Like me.
Yes.
True. Well, not every day. They usually surround when there's been a debacle or conundrum or something really bad. And I use it as a descriptive. It's a verb.
Yes.
Right.
Yeah.
And what do you think is driving that? Why is it that society is now so much more accepting of those types of that type of language, I guess? Or, if you go to the movies, what you see in the movies is now different than what you might have seen 20 or 30 years ago.
Yeah.
And why have we changed in that regard? What's made us become more relaxed, if you will, or more accepting of this behavior, I guess, for lack of a better word?
That's a good question. Yeah. I think that the envelope has continued to be pushed, and you could put a bit of that on Hollywood, right? The kind of upping the factor, like sexier sex screen and really violent and bad language.
Okay.
I wouldn't put it all on Hollywood. I mean, I think as a society, that's all evolved. And it's a good question. I don't know how it arrived to be more accepting today.
Yeah, I don't know if social media has played a part, and what part social media has, I don't know. It's opened up so much. Like, look on Instagram or you look on TikTok or any of those things, and it's unbelievable what you see in terms of skin, language, the talk about sex, and all the kids are seeing this young. So, my daughter will even talk about how the kids in grade 7, when she was in elementary school, were like, they were already having sex. They were already doing drugs. They were already having these words and these conversations, and it was like, okay, it was mainstream. And she looked at it like, oh my God, what are wrong with you people? Because I think that's how we grew up. Right. And how I helped them grow up. But it's like all over the place. It's mainstream. My kids are like really immature compared to what we're seeing now. So I don't know if social media has played a part in that as well.
I guess you're probably right in that it's so less regulated, right? Mm-hmm. Whereas the way we received information, whether it was medical information or just pop culture, as you will, it was all regulated in certain, you know, venues. You had a channel, for example, on the TV, and it was regulated as far as what could be shown. Whereas with the internet, there isn't that same regulation. So are we evolving to the lowest common denominator, so to speak? And what is that? What is the boundary? And does it evolve itself? Does that constantly change? It's definitely a very different in the way that you know, we kind of interact, I guess, societal wise. And I agree with you. It's probably because of the social media, you know, how that's affected us.
Yeah.
Good ways and bad, of course.
There's good to bad to everything. I just think that, I mean, we're definitely seeing a lot of the bad right now. That's for sure.
It's interesting because one could argue we're also seeing good because, of course, you know, if one takes like a recent event like, you know, the invasion of Ukraine, for example, the fact that we are able to see everything in a non-regulated fashion allows you a much clearer picture of what's going on. It's still, there's no doubt, it's still tainted by the perspective you get because you're still getting, you know, actual like a perspective from whatever venue you're looking at, but at least you're getting multiple perspectives and hopefully kind of putting it all together as a, you know, a free thinking and critical thinking individual to kind of come up with a better idea of what's going on. So one could certainly argue that that's better. It gives us a much more greater understanding of politics and how it works and how it influences, you know, countries and societies. But at the same time, people gravitate to whatever perspective, you know, fits their mindset, right?
Yeah,
Exactly.
I agree with that 100%.
Yeah.
You know, yeah, I think somewhere in there is the truth, but you're right. People gravitate to the narrative that they want to follow. And there are different narratives for sure.
And that's why I think we have to be critical thinkers, right? We have to constantly look at our own thought processes and say, you know, are we trapped in some type of logical fallacy, for example? Are we following a pathway and not looking at information critically, but just following what's comfortable for us? And, you know, that's mindfulness, right? We talk about being mindful.
Yeah.
And as we talk and as we interact with people, sometimes kind of dissociating ourselves from us and kind of looking down on this and say, okay, why did I say that? What was my intention? Was it relevant to the discussion, or was I trying to sway it in a way that's consistent with my thought processes? We don't do that enough, right?
No, we don't.
No.
We do a lot by feel, don't we?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
This discussion has gotten really deep, like within minutes. It's
really fast. I know. Well, that's good. Maybe we should just pull it back then a little bit and get to know a bit more about Blair. You are going to be a regular contributor to our show, which is good because I think what we just did was really interesting, right? I think we have an extra perspective and from the male perspective, but also, you know, yeah, from the male perspective, it's nice to have a male voice in here for sure. So, yeah. So what we'd like to just find out more about Blair in general. You are a physician, and we really want to know, you know, what led you to medicine?
Wow. Okay. Yeah. I mean, I can give you the typical answer that the medical student gives when they go for their interview. I'm a little bit beyond that now, having been in practice for more than 10 years. But it's funny how some of those same things that we say, because, you know, we at the time we're thinking this is maybe perhaps what they want to hear. It's actually quite true when I look back. And, you know, as a young man, the things that I really found interest in was health. And whether it was through sport or through education, anything that was relating to the body, how the body worked, specifically biochemistry. I was very interested in that. And so that kind of gradually led me towards the sciences that were related to that, obviously. So less physics, of course, more chemistry and biology. And then the other part of it is just the human aspect, is being able to actually use what knowledge you have and convey it to patients in a way that they can understand and hopefully impact their life. I really like that. And it's almost like teaching in a way, if you will. So I think those were kind of the key things that made me gravitate towards medicine. And then as a young person, you're always thinking, well, what's the highest level I can achieve? I was an achiever, I guess. And so when you look at medicine, you think, well, being a doctor would be, the highest level I could achieve. So you kind of just say, okay, that's where I'm going. And then you go about gathering all the experiences and things you need to get there. And you hope that when you get there, that's where you want to be, right? It's like any goal in life. If you've never been there, how do you know it's really what you want? You assume, you try to make a rational decision based on what your likes are and what you are like as a person. But ultimately, until you get there, you just don't know. But I've been very fortunate, and where I'm at in life is I'm very, very grateful for being able to be at that stage and to be able to have that impact on patients every day that I go to work. So there you go. That's what led me here.
And what was your path in becoming a doctor? Was it sort of the, sort of university after high school, med school, or was it a slightly different route to getting where you are today?
So mine was definitely a different route. I mean, the general route, as you say, is you go to university, you get a degree, and then you go right to medical school. And I didn't do that. I actually took some time off right after my first degree. Had to kind of just reorient myself. I think my maturity level wasn't quite to the level that I was going to need to be able to make that next step. So I worked for a year. I actually started grad school and focused on the research side of things. As I mentioned, as a young man, biochemistry and the actual workings of cells and health and stuff were really a big interest of mine. So I focused on that for about 5 or 6 years. I actually got my PhD in coagulation biochemistry.
Cool.
So I was really quite interested in how proteins interact and mechanisms of protein function and how they allowed clots to form. And then I went back and did my clinical training. And actually that particular pathway for me was really, when I look back at it, was really quite a good pathway, because it brought me to where I am now. I'm kind of the thrombosis specialist in our region, and it all stems from really digging into the biochemistry about how blood clots are formed and interact to kind of lead me to this point. So my pathway is different. Obviously, most people don't do that level of scientific discovery before they get into medicine. Some do. I do have colleagues that also have doctorates in fields that are somewhat related. Some of them are more physiology based as opposed to biochemistry based. But I'd say that's a fairly unique pathway. There's not too many of us that have both a PhD and an MD together, but there's some.
Well, you just answered really our next question, which was, how did you decide on your specialty, on hematology? And it's funny because we were having a discussion and we were like, how do you choose hematology and study of the blood? Like, what brings you in that direction? And oftentimes in your mind, we're thinking, okay, those hematology guys, they must have grown up as total nerds, studying all the time. They're like, not going out anywhere. You just have this like stereotypical picture of what you think a hematologist would be if you're,
Sure.
especially if you're not in the medical world. No offense to any of the other hematologists that I know
No,
out
of
there.
course.
You're all great. But it's kind of that way. And you do not present like that at all.
Interesting.
Although that conversation was quite not
Well, it
very
just shows that you can't judge a book by its cover, right?
exactly. So yeah, so we were interested.
So true. So true.
Yeah.
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 But just to answer your question a bit more directly, I gave you kind of my guide, but I think for a lot of people in hematology, what attracts them is some of the more biochemical aspect of it. I mean, to talk about blood, to understand blood conditions and to treat blood conditions, you really have to understand biochemistry, immunology, biology to some extent. So that really is a big part of what we do, along, of course, with all the other stuff that makes you a doctor. But you have to kind of have that scientific understanding, I think, to want to get into hematology. And maybe that's what led you to think of that archetype of the hematologist being, very bispeckled and reading books and not really interacting with other people. But yeah, there you go.
Thank you.
Is it fair to say then that certainly there's a passion, something that you've been very interested and enjoyed learning and
Absolutely.
sharing that now with your expertise and knowledge with patients? And do you still find that you have passion in your job on a regular basis? I mean, I don't think it's fair to say or expect every single day, but
Sure.
for the most part, do you wake up and I'm ready to go in today. I'm ready to,
Yep.
looking forward to it.
Yeah, I mean, you have to kind of focus on some of the bigger picture aspects along with the smaller picture aspects. I mean, what we do on a day-to-day basis, right? You have to do something that you enjoy, and talking to people and interpreting results for them and coming up with plans for them is definitely something that I enjoy. And using my expertise to do that, I feel very confident and comfortable in that. But interacting with people on a daily basis can be tough. And sometimes people have bad days, and sometimes you have to give bad news. Yeah. And so how do you handle that? And that's when you think of the bigger picture items and say, you know what? I didn't create this bad news. I just have to be able to help somebody with it. And to me, that's something, to be in that position to do that's such a special position, if you will. It's such an important position. So I look at just about everything I do on a daily basis in a bigger picture of how important it is to other people and to help other people. And that makes me feel really satisfied as a physician. People ask, are you happy? And I say, well, yeah, I'm generally happy, but I'm not happy to tell people they have cancer, for example. But I'm very satisfied in that I'm able to do that in, the most professional way and comforting way, empathic way that I can. And I feel that those are some of the things that I can bring to the interaction that help people. But yeah, happiness, grateful. I think when you're grateful, you have an inner happiness. And I feel really, really grateful for being able to get to this point and to do what I do. So hopefully that answers your question, I guess.
It does. Sure.
Yeah.
And I think that's a really important thing to touch on, just like being grateful. I think if more of us, and especially in light of what's been going on and what our last 2 years have been, but if we can find a little bit, one or two things to think of during the day and before we lay our head down at night, I think that can really do wonders for yourself and your perspective.
Right.
Yeah.
I think that, when we were younger, we may think, well, the world was simpler, it didn't have the problems it has, but that's obviously not true. I mean, it had the same problems. We just didn't know about them because we didn't have social media. We weren't as glued to our phones. We didn't have constant feedback. And in fact, the world was probably worse off in terms of, technology and hunger and all sorts of things in that regard. So we're just much more attuned to it now. So we tend to feel that maybe things are worse. But I think when you put that perspective on it, you have to think, you know what, we need to be grateful for the fact that we're able to, identify a disease like COVID, for example, and come up with an ability to treat it and contain it as well as we have, compared to years ago when we wouldn't have had those opportunities. So perspective is really, really important for having that mindset of being grateful for where we're at, right?
I completely agree.
Me too. Yeah. Yeah.
Say something controversial. I got to get the, we got to get some arguments going.
We do. It's hard to argue with that. It's hard to argue and say, well, I shouldn't be grateful for anything. My life really sucks. When in reality, where we live, in Canada, we're all doing quite well for ourselves.
Sure.
We're really not struggling with those things that you said. Like, we don't have food. We were able to very quickly get a vaccine for our pandemic.
Yeah, absolutely. That is the speed at which that rolled out. I think it was roughly a year's time. They were talking 3 to 5 years initially. So to be able to have that so quickly, you can imagine how many lives it's actually saved. Impressive. And theoretically, it should only get quicker and quicker, right? I mean, this is the first time we've ever really done this on this scale. So we should be able to learn from what we did and be even quicker in the future. So that's something to be incredibly grateful for.
Exactly.
Definitely.
Yeah. And when we're sitting here and you got to think about it and go, oh, here I am complaining that Niagara's only allowing one person in a lane in the pool and Burlington allows 4. And you're like, really, that's not a big deal in the grand scheme of things. Like, we've got it pretty good. And we really should be grateful about where we're living, what we have, and find something happy every day for that.
Right.
So we were wondering how, you're a busy guy, your job is very important for us. And how do you create balance in your life outside of work?
Well, that in itself takes effort. And it's fairly well known that physicians aren't really necessarily good at that. And I certainly have a lot of my colleagues where I look and see that they struggle with that. So I think a big part of it comes with knowing yourself and looking back. Maybe that was one of the other benefits of coming into medicine the way I did, having to do or having done my doctorate before going into medical school. When you do that, you learn a little bit more about the balance in life because you have to study. And as a PhD student, I had to work. So I was a teaching assistant and, pay my bills and all those things. So you have to struggle a little bit with balance before you get into medical school. And once you get into medical school, you're a bit cloistered, right? I mean, people look at you as kind of the next one, and they kind of shelter you in terms of that stuff, finances or whatever. Focus on learning. You have to learn the best you can be. And then you buy into the mentality of just don't, putting all of your resources towards becoming the best doctor you should be, which you should do to some extent, but you can't lose sight of the balance that's needed to have a proper mental state. And that's a hard thing for people to navigate if they don't have some life experience you know, before that. And a lot of my colleagues in medical school were, you know, in their early 20s and never had to pay bills. Their parents just paid everything. Whereas I lived in a basement apartment for 4 years and, you know, had to pay my gas bill and my groceries and et cetera for a period of time before I made that next leap. So maybe that's what it was. Not sure, but I do have a pretty good understanding of how much I'm able to do and still feel like I'm a human being, so to speak.
Yeah.
And I make sure that I reach into all the different pots, right? Like reaching into the physical activity pot, reaching into the artistic and creativity pot, reaching into the family and friends pot, and making sure that a little bit of each gets thrown into the recipe so that it's a balance. But again, that all comes from having to have some experiences before getting into the crush of medicine, because medicine is like, you know, trying to suck a drink out of a fire hose. It's like it's just coming at you, and you're just struggling to try to keep it all together, because there's so much information out there that you're responsible for as a physician. So having to have those life experiences before getting into medicine, I think, had a big impact.
I think there's a lot to be said for those life experiences, and not just having your parents pay for everything. That teaches you exactly that, like, one, how to look after yourself, two, how to create balance in your life and be responsible, but, you know, also understand where fun is needed in the mix,
right?
You know, so you can move forward.
And some things don't necessarily seem fun at first. So just to kind of bring it back to what you talk about here, exercise. I started running distance in, in medical school. And I trained for my first marathon when I was in, I think, my third year of medicine. And some of my colleagues were like, "What are you doing?" Like, but that, looking at it on the surface, running a marathon doesn't seem like fun. Like, why would you do that? There's a lot of pain and a lot of boring running, you know, 4-hour training sessions, just running. Like, that doesn't seem like fun at all. But you have to kind of look beyond that and say, well, you know, people do it all the time and people seem to enjoy it. So there must be some type of enjoyment and benefit, you know, beyond that. And of course, you realize that theoretically you should be healthier if you do it properly. But yeah, on the surface, it doesn't seem like fun at all, but you engage in it and you learn so much about yourself through the process. And then it becomes fun, or at least it becomes fulfilling. Maybe fun's not the right term, but really fulfilling, and makes you feel really confident. And is that because you understand yourself better? Probably, but there's obviously other benefits to it too. But yeah, trying to identify things and just go do them in an educated way, knowing that you're going to get some benefits of it. You wouldn't just decide to do something and have no idea that it's going to be beneficial for you. You kind of have an idea, but it's this idea of something that's not instant gratification, that it's a goal that's achievable, but down the road. I think that's really important for people to get involved in, to reap those benefits. And it's hard right now because we have such an instant gratification society. It's like, if I can't click on a button and be happy, then I'm not doing it.
Yeah,
it's true.
That's really true. There really is a sense of accomplishment, certainly in long distance running and achieving goals. And, you know, even in the day to day, like you said, it's not always fun, but you always feel better when you're done. You always feel better after you come back in, and, you know, glad I got out there, and a little bit back to being grateful. I find, I don't know if you do on your runs, but, you know, grateful the sun's shining, or, gee, that's a beautiful tree that's in bloom, or even right now, you know, the sun is you know, the sun's reflecting off the snow, looking like diamonds sparkling. You know, you kind of clear your mind, get into yourself a little bit.
Yeah, it's great. And and I'm really grateful where we live, out here in Niagara. There's so many gorgeous roads and routes to run on. And I have this 115K loop that I can run, and you can go every week, and every week it looks different.
Oh, wow.
Whether it's because of the snow, or because the grapevines are growing, or maybe the fruit trees are blossoming. It's always something different every week, and it changes. And so it's a beautiful opportunity to take that time to notice the nature, to get inside your own head, and you know, remember all the things that you're grateful for, get rid of all the things that are bothering you that day. I actually find there's a lot of winning in the process versus just looking at that button that's really quick to press, or getting to that end result right away. Right. I find the process has the most gratification.
Right.
I would agree with that too.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And part of that too, I think, is understanding yourself, whether it's your limits or what you're capable of. I think we get a lot of benefit out of that, which is, of course, from the process, right? The process has to wear you down to know what you're capable of.
Yeah.
And I think maybe some of the gratefulness, the happiness, the contentment comes from that undergoing that process, and understanding, educating about yourself. And how do you convey that to somebody, like, let's say, a child, right? If you have children, for example, how do you tell them, hey, you've got to go and bleed a little bit before you're going to get better? You know, or hey, you should go and bleed a little bit, and just get some. And believe me, you'll be better for it. Like, how do you convince somebody of that? I don't know. Especially when their alternatives are, or you can go to your room, click on the computer, and you will be instantly happy shooting somebody in Call of Duty.
Exactly. Yeah, it's not an easy balance. Because I have one of the gaming kids who loves her computer and her games and shooting people and things like that. And it's a struggle to kick her out the door and get her to interact with people and do stuff. But my kids will tell you that I don't mince words. And I tell them, I'm sorry, but you got to get out the door. You're going to do this. This is what's happening. And they'll be like, you don't care. And I'm like, no, I do care. This is why you're doing this.
Right.
Right. And it's not an easy thing to do. And it's a struggle to, you know, especially like to make kids do stuff now. But I think it's important that you force them to do certain things sometimes, even when they don't want to.
Right.
Yeah, and I agree. I think, you know, my kids are a little bit older. Well, our daughters are the same age, but you know, in university and you know, stress in their programs and with living away from home. And actually, they're both in Ottawa, so they've been enduring the repercussions of, you know, the protest and not really being able to enjoy the city and get out and do the things that young people should be doing right now. But, you know, the importance of that balance and getting out. And even if it's, you know, very cold in Ottawa during the winter, but throw on a few extra layers and get out for a walk, you know, for 20 minutes and clear your mind and work through some of that school stress and life stress, right? It's, you know, and we encourage through the growing up years, but, you know, as the three of us have already discussed, there's so much benefit to having that balance in your life. you know, it's not necessarily something you have to do 5 times a day. But like you said, Blair, having your pots and balancing all that out.
Sure.
Yeah. You did mention you had an artistic pot.
Yeah.
Yeah,
So
right.
I'm wondering, I'm curious to know what that is.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, I'm assuming that everybody has these different sides of them, of course, some more developed than others, I guess. I never really kind of investigated my creative / artistic side too much growing up. It's funny, I can recall writing the occasional story for school, for example, and actually kind of enjoying it, but not really doing it beyond that. There was a period of time where I actually wrote a little bit of poetry even, but didn't really share it with anyone, just kind of wrote it for myself. But later in life, actually, well, I played a little bit of guitar kind of through university and wouldn't say that I'm really gifted at it, but I did enjoy it. But singing actually was something I've really, really come to enjoy. And I had no idea about that until I was literally in my 40s and just practicing guitar with a friend who also played guitar. And we had another friend who played the drums, and we decided to all get together and just jam together, as you do. And after a while, we thought, well, why don't we try and play like a show for people? Because we're not too bad, and people like live music, and we knew some people who would come and watch us. But we didn't have anybody to sing. And literally, they all looked at me. Well, they all just said, I am not singing. There's no way I'm going to sing. And I was the only one who would even entertain the thought of singing.
Good on you.
And well, you know, I mean, I kind of like to sing by myself, you know, in the shower, or if I'm listening to a song on the radio. So I thought, well, I'll give it a shot, because I kind of knew that I'm an okay guitar player, but I'm not as good as the other guy was. So it didn't really make sense for, you know, he should be the guitar player. So I thought, okay, well, then I'll try my hand at the singing part. And it turned out that I just really enjoy that. And so kind of delving into that, learning how to sing, taking lessons, learning actually how to sing opera, which I decided that I wanted, if I was going to learn how to sing, I should learn how to sing properly. So I had a friend who actually taught opera, so I started taking lessons, and I've actually really quite enjoyed that genre as well. But then that led me back to this idea of writing that I had when I was younger, and I started to write songs for our band. And I think music therapy, it's beautiful. And when you think about themes and write lyrics to songs that reflect those themes, there's a lot of I think therapeutic value in that, and that's the creative part. So it's been really exciting to get more into that and to kind of dig at that and see, hey, what can I do that might be able to lead to something that is a finished product, something that you can look at and say, hey, I made that. So that's the creative part of things that I've been focusing on more. And the reality is, it's really only for myself and the bands. And if the band members like it, great. And then if we've actually started to play our own music at shows, and other people seem to like it as well, and that's fantastic too. But that's not obviously the goal. It's not like I'm trying to make any money or any fame or anything from the music. I'm really focusing on the process, which is much like we talked about with running, and how much I get out of that process. To me, that's the real value in all of that. But I'm fortunate in that I seem to be able to construct music that is actually something that other people would listen to. So the band is bought into it, and I let them kind of tweak things as much as they like. You know, they want to add something fantastic. It's a whole communal thing here, the band, and let's just try and make it better for the purposes of making music, not necessarily for the purposes of making other people like our music. But but yeah, it seems like we're able to make music that other people enjoy listening to. So that's been really fun to investigate as well. So that's the creative side of things.
It sounds like a great journey, and we'll have to come check your band out sometime.
Absolutely. It's been 2 years since our last show, just before a COVID lockdown. And it was good. It was our biggest show to date. We had 300 people out to see us, actually, which was cool.
That's really good.
Yeah. And the way we do it is we don't do shows to raise awareness and money for charity. So that's really the other focus of our band, is to be charitable. And that gives it just a bigger feeling of what we're doing. So it's not like we're just making music. We're making music and we're helping people. So this charity show that we did was with the Angel Project, which is in Toronto. And it's a charity that works to fund things like computers and other types of items that people in long-term care facilities don't get from the government, for example. And which is a really cool thing. And they're actually coupled with the Toronto Maple Leafs. So some of the Maple Leafs will go in with the Angel Project to these long-term care facilities and talk to the residents and, young people who are quadriplegic, let's say, and have to be cared for in a long-term facility. Well, they could potentially benefit from having some type of extra item that isn't going to be covered by the government, but is helpful in life. So it's a really cool project. And it just so happens that they had a lot of people that were interested in coming out to a show. And the next thing you know, we had 300 people at the show, and it was a blast. And we were so excited about taking it to the next level in terms of more shows. We had a bunch lined up for 2020. And then, of course, obviously the world changed. So we've not been back out to do any shows. But
well, hopefully soon.
Yeah, hopefully we get the lineup back in order and we can come out and see you too.
Absolutely. Please do.
Oh, yeah.
One of my dreams as a kid was to be a lead singer for a band, and I would totally do it. I would
nice.
I would get up there and sing, but there's one problem.
Which is?
I can't sing. I can't sing.
But
I can't sing at all. I put myself out there. I could rock it out. Oh, believe me, people told me.
Take a look at Tom Waits. Take a look at Neil Young isn't necessarily a great singer, right?
Right. Got to find your genre, I guess, or the right way of singing.
And find a way to get famous.
And find your voice, right? You have to just find what your voice is, and polish it up. It's like running a triathlon, right? But lots of people run them not because they think they're going to win them, but because of the process.
Yeah, well, that's me too. Sheila's on the other level, but
yeah, of course, there are some people who
I'm just doing it to do it.
But here's a good example. Like Sheila has all this talent, and she's doing it, and then you have yourself. And I don't know what your talent level is like, but it sounds like it's not to the level of Sheila's.
No.
And yet that doesn't stop you from going out and doing it, right? And who's to say Sheila gets any more benefit or enjoyment out of it than you do? And that's ultimately why we're doing these types of things. It's for our own personal benefit. Yeah. Some people are lucky enough to win medals and fame and fortune and all that stuff, but the vast majority of us are not. And yet we still, I think, get a tremendous amount of benefit out of it. And that's really what we should be focusing on. So, learning how to sing and getting some friends together and, playing in your basement. There's no reason why you can't do that.
Well, you never know. Maybe one of these days.
Sure.
Karaoke machine. You got to bring it over.
There you go.
Karaoke night.
I do. I have a karaoke machine.
Yeah.
Perfect.
I've been told to turn it off.
No, bring it over and we'll set it up on the deck. We'll have the lights out. Yeah. And then we can. Your
neighbors will be calling the police.
No, he'll probably want to come over.
Some old ladies on the deck trying to sing.
But the beauty of starting at such a low level is that your goals are not that high. Your goal is just to not make people, not like you. That's your goal.
You can only get better. There's only one way to go.
Right, exactly.
No,
There's
it's
no
so
expectation there.
That's
We
right.
start here. Can you really
There you
go
go.
further?
No, you can't. You can only go up.
Exactly. It can't get worse. It's
You know
beautiful.
what, Blair? I like you.
Oh, I appreciate that, Lisa. Thank you. I like yourself as well.
Yeah. And Lisa, if you have a glass of wine, you
Well,
always sound good. You
When I
always
have a
sound
glass
good.
of wine, then I think I'm like, Adele level.
Always.
But, then you watch the video playback and you realize that,
No.
you're just singing in the gutter.
Okay. So we just have a couple questions
Yeah, sure.
to finish up with.
Okay.
Since you're going to be a regular contributor, you get to experience a couple of our regular questions that our unsuspecting guests are going to get.
Okay. So I'm a regular contributor as of now. I've passed the test so far.
You are. You passed the test. You are in. Yes.
Fantastic.
You made Lisa laugh. You're like totally in. Yeah.
Beautiful.
Good. All right. So name 2 things about yourself that you think our audience should know.
Okay. Do you mean in terms of like character, or do you mean just like random facts, or what are you thinking?
It's up to you. A character and random facts. Random facts are always fun.
Okay.
Yeah.
So in terms of character, I guess what I'd like people to know is that the way that I'm trying to live my life is the way that I think, for me, life should be lived, and I think that gives me a lot of harmony. I'm doing what I think I should be doing. I'm trying to fulfill that idea of what I think life should be, and in that instance, helping people and doing work that I think is helpful for people, and at the same time understanding who I am and myself. I think these are kind of the core principles of what I do as a person, and I think the fact that I'm able to do them gives me a lot of interpersonal harmony, and that's, I feel good about it. And I think if people kind of try to identify that a bit more and move in that direction more, a lot of people might feel the same way. So that might be, one thing about me, a big over kind of arching type of thing about me. In terms of random facts, I've now visited 27 countries.
Wow.
So
that's a lot.
I know for some people that's still going to be a small number. Some people are probably 50, 60, 70, but 27 I'm pretty happy with. I'm hopeful to add to that, and I think travel is a great way to expand and understand who you are as well, and learning other cultures. Cuba, one of my favorite places to go. I know it's a fairly common place to go for just sitting on the beach, but I got to go into Havana, down to the Bay of Pigs, and kind of do a little bit of travel around the countryside in Cuba and learning about that culture. Very different from, let's say, going to, Austria or any other European countries. So I think travel is really cool, and 27 and counting. So we'll see now that things are opening up. Hopefully we'll see how I can add to that.
Where would you like to go next?
So of all places, actually, Bulgaria. Really? I know somebody from Bulgaria, and it's not a very common place for people to go to. Has a very rich history in terms of medieval type of developments and architecture. And so I'm interested. I don't know much about the Eastern Bloc countries. I've been to Hungary, but haven't been kind of beyond that. And so Romania, Bulgaria, that kind of area of Europe, I'd be very interested in learning about. Obviously, right now, with the way things are, it's a little bit up in the air as to how much travel in Europe is going to be going on. But let's keep our fingers crossed that things work out.
Yeah, quickly. Yeah. Awesome. Okay. And now I'll ask you this question. I've kind of asked you once before, but we're going to do it for our guests.
Okay.
If you were running a race,
Right.
and you were close to the end,
Okay.
and okay, if you were running a race and you were close to the end,
Sure.
would you crap your pants or stop at the porta potty, before you hit that finish line?
Whew. Yeah, that's a good question.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a good one. I've been fortunate enough that that's not ever happened to me. I suppose you look at it as, why am I really running this race? And if it really means that much to me to finish, let's say I was trying to break a certain PB and I was really close to doing that, then I might suck it up and just crap my pants and get that PB. If I'm like 20 minutes off my PB and with no hope of making that back, I might just say, you know what, today's not my day. Today I'm going to stop at the porta potty.
To offer some perspective on this, Christian Blumenfeld is an excellent triathlete. He won gold in the Olympics and actually just completed the fastest, although challenge fastest time in Ironman.
Wow.
It was in Mexico.
Okay.
And he had a little bit of a stomach bug.
Yeah.
And he still ran one of the fastest times ever with 3 porta potty stops.
Wow. So he was able to balance his body's needs with his desire to run a great race. Well, good for him. That's all about knowing yourself, knowing that if I go to the porta potty and expunge the toxins in my body, I will actually run faster without those toxins and weight of stool in my body. See, that's science. He's just a smart guy.
Yeah,
I know. Actually, those Norwegian long distance guys, they're doing something special right now. They've got it down pat.
They've got their training and lower zone levels. Their training methods are being looked at closely by the rest of the world because they virtually triathlon's not a sport in Norway. Cross-country skiing is.
Sure.
And in a very short period of time, they've become a powerhouse in the triathlon world.
Wow.
They even won a gold medal in track.
Wow.
Yes. At the Olympics.
Well, since
so
we're
I am married to Norwegians. The one thing I can add to that is back to getting out and connecting with nature and being very active. That's a big part of their lifestyle there.
Right.
And there's no such thing as bad weather. There's only bad clothing.
Okay. It's all about preparation. Love it.
Little kids in daycare are out with their rubber pants and their wellies playing in the rain.
Right.
Right? Like there's no stopping being active and getting outside.
Right.
Where we get a little bit of cold here and
the buses are down.
Turn the fireplace on and drink some wine.
That's right.
Well, it's all about choices. That's what life is.
For sure. Ones. All right.
Well, it's been a pleasure to speak with you today, Blair.
Thank you very much, Sheila and Lisa. It's been a pleasure to be a part of the Gab.
Yes. We're looking forward to your next visit.
I will do my best to entertain as much as possible.
Perfect.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
My pleasure.